I've got some troubling news about England's royal family.
Catherine can access my personal fortune, not Camilla. 7 shocking words penned by Prince Philip, sealed for decades, and now they've exploded into the royal spotlight.
There were not many people who understood just how broad his interests were and how supportive he was of an astonishingly wide range.
Buckingham Palace. Imagine one letter hidden deep in the royal archives with the power to erase a queen consort's legacy and hand everything to the woman Camilla never saw coming. Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, who stood silently beside Queen Elizabeth for 70 years, didn't just leave a will, he left a weapon. This wasn't a simple inheritance. This was a time bomb, a final act of defiance, and a palace-wide shockwave waiting to erupt. Here's what the royals don't want you to hear. Queen Elizabeth read this letter before Philip passed. She cried, she approved it, and she never said a word. Right now, senior royals are panicked, some wishing the letter had been burned, terrified of the chaos that would unfold once the public discovered the truth. Because what Philip wrote wasn't just, Catherine gets the money. It screamed, Camilla threatens everything we've built. She must be stopped. But why? What did Philip see behind those palace walls that terrified him so deeply? What did Camilla represent that required such an explosive, posthumous intervention? Before we reveal every jaw-dropping detail, the secret meetings, the legal clauses banning Camilla's family forever, the alliance shielding Catherine, and Prince George's cryptic viral message, you need to subscribe, hit that like button, share, and comment. The royal family's PR machine is running at full throttle, trying to bury this story, and YouTube's algorithm might hide this video from your feed. Now picture this, a routine archival review. Dusty documents, expected procedures, then silence. The kind of silence that screams a storm is coming. Beneath decades of estate papers lay a letter sealed with Prince Philip's unmistakable mark and a chilling instruction: to be opened upon my passing in presence of the keeper and one blood heir. Think about that. Philip knew this letter would explode after his death. He knew it would spark chaos, yet he sealed it anyway. Why? What could be so critical, so dangerous, that the Duke of Edinburgh would plant a time bomb in the palace itself? Here's where it gets wild. Very few in the inner court even knew this letter existed. Not Charles, not William, perhaps not even the Queen herself, or so they claimed. When the seal was finally broken, witnesses say, time froze. Senior officials, legal advisors, and the keeper of the Privy Seal were paralysed with shock. Because Philip's message wasn't subtle, diplomatic, or cautious, it was brutally clear. His personal fortune, quietly amassed and completely separate from crown funds, was to go to Catherine, Princess of Wales, and explicitly not to Camilla, Queen Consort. Let that sink in. Philip didn't just favour Catherine, he actively excluded Camilla in writing with legal witnesses. This wasn't a preference, it was a royal declaration of war. Those present during the reading described the air as suffocating. One anonymous courtier said it felt like Philip had reached from beyond the grave and grabbed the monarchy by the throat. The wording left no room for interpretation. Philip praised Catherine's unshakable devotion to duty, contrasting it sharply with what he called conflicted motivations, threatening the crown's clarity. Who exactly was he referring to? Who represents those conflicted motivations? The implications hit Clarence House like a freight train, shattering the illusion of Charles and Camilla's assumed permanence. Panic erupted. Advisors scrambled to verify authenticity. Could it be a forgery? A tabloid fabrication? Wishful thinking from anti-Camilla factions? Every test, every legal review, every examination confirmed the same truth. Authentic, undeniable, final. Philip's handwriting, sharp, deliberate, and absolute. But the storm didn't stop there. Behind closed doors, senior courtiers, whose job is to protect the monarchy's image at all costs, debated whether the letter could simply be suppressed. Can you imagine a royal's dying wish buried for political convenience? Whispered efforts to file it away quietly, to pretend it never existed, were blocked by a rare internal override from the keeper of the Privy Seal, insisting that Philip's final directive be honoured and officially logged. One official later described it perfectly. The letter was a political earthquake in royal disguise. And here's where it gets even more heartbreaking. Leaked diary entries from a former lady-in-waiting suggest Queen Elizabeth knew about the letter weeks before Philip's death. She read it, understood its explosive meaning, and wept, but she said nothing. Did she respect Philip's wishes, fear tearing the family apart, or know that revealing it while alive would shake the very institution she spent 70 years protecting? We may never know, but the weight of that secret, carried to her grave, tells us everything about how dangerous this letter truly was. To understand why Philip took such a dramatic, politically explosive stand, we need to rewind and go back to his final years. Behind the public smiles, ceremonial bows, and carefully choreographed appearances, Philip saw something terrifying. A monarchy at war with itself. During those last years, he watched two completely contrasting visions for the crown's future rise. One rooted in duty, restraint, and tradition. The other in disruption, reform, and personal agenda. What unsettled him most wasn't the scandals or tabloid headlines. It was what he saw behind palace doors, the deepening divide between two camps that threatened to split the monarchy down the middle. On one side, William and Catherine, restraint, responsibility, and quiet service, carrying the weight without complaint. On the other, Charles and Camilla, modernisation, reform, stirring unease among traditionalists and the public alike. Philip, ever the strategist, who spent decades studying how monarchies survive and fall, recognised the existential danger of this dual monarchy. In confidential sessions with senior aides, he voiced fears not about change itself, but confusion. Two competing futures threatening the crown's singular identity. Think about that. A monarchy can survive scandal, it can survive controversy, but can it survive being pulled in two opposite directions? Not knowing what it all meant, multiple palace insiders now say Philip grew alarmed by Camilla's rising influence over both public perception and private decisions. Let's be clear, Philip wasn't new to wielding quiet power behind the throne. For over 70 years, he had mastered it. He understood influence. But what disturbed him, what kept him awake at night, according to a senior footman, was how Camilla's sway seemed to shift priorities from the institution toward persona, from we to I. His worry wasn't personal, it was institutional. A monarchy built on mystique, unity, and tradition could not survive blurred allegiances or diluted purpose. In one documented, never-meant-to-be public conversation with a senior courtier, Philip reportedly warned, "If you allow parallel lines of power, the crown loses its centre. Look at the royal family today." Do you think he was wrong? Philip's respect for Catherine had quietly grown profound. He saw something rare, something essential, the discipline he once demanded of younger royals, the ability to endure scrutiny without scandal, to project calm stability without spectacle, to remain still when everyone else was spinning. To Philip, that stillness wasn't weakness, it was strength. While others engaged in image battles and PR wars, Catherine simply stood, unwavering, unshakable, present.
It is a year since we launched the Royal Foundation Centre for Early Childhood, and the reason for the centre's launch was twofold. It was to not only help improve the early childhood outcomes, but it's also about prevention.
A footman who served during Philip's final year at Windsor said the Duke referred to Catherine as the monarchy's spine, even if no one had noticed yet. That's high praise from a man sparing with compliments. But Philip's concerns went beyond family preference. This was about survival. During late-night calls to Windsor in his final months, he raised alarms about succession vulnerabilities that could destabilise everything. Charles was about to ascend, a king who'd waited longer than any heir in British history. Philip feared public scepticism over Camilla's role could spark a constitutional crisis.
Freely, please let us not become too politically correct.
What if trust eroded further? What if internal factions became open disloyalty? What if the centuries-long balance keeping the monarchy stable simply collapsed for a man who had seen monarchies across Europe fall in the last century? These weren't idle questions. They were warnings written in historical blood. Philip acted like a military strategist, planning for every contingency, including the one where he'd no longer be there to hold the line. That's what this letter was. Not revenge, not favouritism, strategic intervention. Catherine's summons. When Princess Catherine was called to a private Windsor meeting, she expected the usual briefings, patronages, protocols, mundane responsibilities. What she received instead was an envelope that would change everything. The seal had been broken. The letter was laid before her. On centuries-old mahogany, surrounded by portraits of monarchs who had faced their own reckoning, Philip's words were read aloud. Sources say Catherine went still, not shocked, not overwhelmed, but completely still. Because this wasn't just about money, it was about power, loyalty, and betrayal, all wrapped into one impossible inheritance. Philip had named her, not the Queen consort, not one of his own children, as steward of his personal fortune, a fortune meticulously curated through trusts, investments, and foreign accounts entirely separate from the sovereign estate. Tens of millions quietly accumulated over decades, now hers to control. But it wasn't wealth that shook her. It was the weight of trust, the realization that the man who avoided public favoritism had just placed her name underlined in history. Later, alone in her Kensington study, Catherine reportedly reread the letter 3 times. Her inner circle, trained to read her silences, described her as stricken yet unwavering. Because the meaning was clear, to follow Philip's wishes was to defy Camilla, perhaps even Charles himself. To ignore it would be to betray the man who, in his final written act, entrusted her to carry his legacy forward. This wasn't just an inheritance, it was a summons. Prince William's reaction, multiple palace sources say, was far more fraught. He found himself trapped between impossible loyalties, a newly crowned king, and a wife suddenly thrust into a high-stakes proxy war she never asked to fight. The Prince of Wales reportedly became tense, uncharacteristically short-tempered, pacing Windsor's East Gallery late at night, muttering. He knew exactly what this would do. Of course, Philip knew. The Duke of Edinburgh never acted by accident. This was precise, calculated, designed to force a choice that couldn't be avoided in a family that measured loyalty, whispers, and glances. This letter was a thunderclap that wouldn't stop echoing. Catherine, realizing she needed guidance from someone who understood Philip's mind and the monarchy's survival instincts, turned to the one person she could trust without hesitation, Princess Anne. Rumours suggest a discreet meeting in Sandringham's private gardens, no aides, no staff, just 2 women facing an impossible choice. Anne, known for her unwavering loyalty to her father and the institution, allegedly advised Catherine, "Do what he asked, but do it your way." That guidance may have been the stabilising force Catherine needed. What followed was a masterclass in royal power plays. Catherine didn't issue public statements. She didn't engage the press. She didn't explain, defend, or justify. Yet her actions sent a signal clearer than any press release ever could. She caught all direct communication with Camilla. No words, no messages, not even a glance. In a family dependent on silent diplomacy and reading between every carefully constructed line, this was a rebuke louder than any scandal, a declaration that couldn't be misunderstood. As days passed, courtiers noticed subtle but unmistakable shifts. Catherine's influence quietly expanded. Briefings rerouted through her office. Patronage updates came directly via her private secretary. Invitations to high-level engagements were addressed to her first, then others. Power was shifting. Not loudly, not through public confrontation, but subtly, deliberately, unmistakably in her direction. Everyone at the palace asked, how far would Catherine go? And how far would Camilla push back? Queen consort Camilla was never meant to be sidelined. When Philip's letter was read aloud during a confidential Privy Council review, her fury erupted. Seasoned courtiers who'd witnessed decades of royal drama described her reaction as explosive. One aide whispered objects were thrown at Clarence House shortly after. This wasn't about money, it was about legitimacy, identity, and being acknowledged not just as Charles's wife, but as a rightful matriarch of the monarchy. Philip's letter had struck at the very heart of that claim. Within hours, Camilla summoned King Charles for a private confrontation. What began as tense discussion escalated into veiled ultimatums, leaving Charles visibly shaken. Palace insiders say she threatened to withdraw from public duties unless the matter was contained and contextualized before the press could weaponize it against her. Imagine the pressure, a newly crowned king, balancing his wife's dignity against his father's dying wish. A scenario Philip may have anticipated, perhaps even intended in some dark, strategic way. Camilla didn't just react emotionally, She mobilised. Almost immediately, Clarence House operatives sprang into action, working tirelessly behind the scenes to downplay the letter's true legal significance. Carefully crafted statements were circulated, suggesting the document reflected personal sentiments, mere reflections of Philip's thoughts, not binding legal directives. Select briefings were subtly leaked to friendly journalists, hinting that Philip had penned multiple private notes in his final months. This one might just be another unfiled musing, insiders whispered. But by then, the impact was undeniable. The letter wasn't hearsay. It had been signed, witnessed, and officially logged into the royal archives, as official as any royal document could ever be. When the initial effort to minimise its importance stalled, Camilla pivoted, turning inward and consolidating her position among the palace's most influential and loyal allies. Most notably, the Protocol Clarion, a long-standing advisory circle specialising in constitutional precedents and internal palace power dynamics. The group convened for a private strategy session at Highgrove, where Camilla allegedly demanded a complete audit of all shared royal patronages, especially those where Catherine wielded influence. The goal was unmistakable: recalibrate power, retrench influence, and reassert total control. Soon, subtle but deliberate changes began appearing throughout the royal apparatus. Two charities long linked to Prince Philip were suddenly redirected under Camilla's purview. An educational initiative once spearheaded by Catherine was halted for a structural review. Then came her boldest manoeuvre yet. Camilla began laying groundwork to fast-track her son, Tom Parker Bowles, into a formal palace role, presented under the guise of public outreach and modernisation. The signal was crystal clear. This legacy would not bypass her family without a fight. But even that was just the beginning. Reports surfaced that the keeper of the archives, the very figure who authorised the release of Philip's letter, was being quietly pressured. One high-level phone call from Camilla's office raised concerns over internal loyalty and security. Many interpreted the veiled tone as a stark warning: cross Camilla at your peril. Yet even as the Queen Consort circled her wagons, preparing for what could become total war, another faction quietly rallied around the very woman Philip had chosen, the Inner Four. Not everyone in Buckingham Palace supported Camilla's moves. These secretive meetings were conducted with the precision and secrecy of intelligence operations. A powerful new alliance began to emerge. Insiders dubbed them the Inner Four, their mission razor-sharp: protect Catherine, honour Philip's final directive, and ensure the monarchy's survival didn't fall into the hands of someone they believed could destabilise it. Who were they? Princess Anne, Philip's steadfast daughter, who had always understood the weight of royal responsibility better than anyone. Duchess Sophie, whose quiet diplomacy earned trust across all factions, making her the perfect bridge builder. Sir Clive Alderton, the King's private secretary, who, despite his position, never hid his unease about Camilla's rising influence. And Lord Fellows, a legal mind so entwined with royal protocols that some insiders called him the living archive. Together, these four formed a silent bulwark against what they viewed as a dangerous deviation from the monarchy's true course. Their first meeting was held under the radar at Sandringham, arranged through Anne's personal network. Security was so tight that even household staff remained unaware of who was meeting or why. There, the legacy directive was meticulously dissected. Philip's letter, its legal standing, its implications, its deeper message, was studied line by line. According to a leak from a staffer who discovered discarded notes, the tone was urgent, the mood defiant. One phrase captured everything: "This is not rebellion, this is preservation." Let that sink in. These weren't rogue actors. They were the monarchy's immune system, activating to protect the institution from what they perceived as a potentially fatal infection. Lord Fellows was first to highlight crucial concerns about estate structure. If Philip's private wealth was to transition to Catherine, it needed an airtight legal framework impervious to challenge or dismantling. Sir Clive revealed something even more shocking. Before his passing, Philip had deliberately reshaped certain holdings, investments, and offshore trusts, making them completely separate from Crown assets. This wasn't emotional. It was methodical, meticulous, strategic. Philip had been planning this for years. Then came a chilling discovery buried deep within the estate documentation. A secondary codicil, rarely mentioned, even less understood. It referenced the appointment of an unshakable moral steward, a phrase never used in previous royal directives. The Inner Four interpreted this as a coded endorsement of Catherine, not merely for inheritance, but for something far larger, a symbolic passing of the torch, safeguarding the crown's moral and institutional continuity. Do you see what Philip was really doing? He wasn't just leaving money, he was choosing the monarchy's conscience. Speculation intensified when Princess Anne allegedly revealed she had personally delivered Philip's original letter to Catherine. If true, this meant Anne had always known the plan, making her role far from passive. She was the courier of her father's final will, and in many ways, its executor. Meanwhile, another palace faction, the Clarion Ring, composed of Camilla-aligned loyalists and longtime traditionalists, began tracking the Inner Four's secretive gatherings. The palace increasingly resembled a chessboard, each side manoeuvring quietly but deliberately. Camilla's team moved to intercept communications. The Inner Four became even more discreet, using intermediaries, handwritten notes, and proxy advisors to safeguard their strategy. But Philip's letter was not the only document. Another emerged, casting an even darker shadow over Charles's reign, the rumoured sunset provision. Buried deep within Philip's personal directives, cryptically called the Sunset Clause. It had been sealed in a Geneva lockbox, intentionally placed outside UK legal jurisdiction. Everything changed. This wasn't just about fortune anymore. It was about ending claims entirely. The annex, titled Coil 4B, revealed instructions of staggering finality. Philip declared, "No assets, whether material, symbolic, or institutional, may pass to or through a consort lacking sovereign lineage." Let that sink in. It entirely excluded Camilla and any descendant or dependent from claims, not just to his personal fortune, but to any structure, trust, or legacy bearing his name. It was executed like a surgical strike, the language precise, deliberate, chilling in clarity. Legal experts later confirmed the Sunset Clause served as a failsafe, preventing what Philip described as the misdirection of institutional equity toward parties unbound by royal succession. Philip's strategy was cold, calculated, and ruthless, but designed to preserve the monarchy's integrity beyond his lifetime. Every phrase, clause, and safeguard ensured his vision for the institution would survive, insulated from influence he deemed destabilizing. The stakes were monumental. Every actor, every faction, every maneuver now hinged on this directive. The palace had become a high-stakes battlefield of influence, loyalty, and legacy. And this was only the beginning of the fallout that would reverberate through Buckingham Palace, Sandringham, and beyond, shaping the monarchy for generations to come. The Sunset Clause, as his legal team later confirmed, was inserted as a failsafe against what Philip described as the misdirection of institutional equity toward parties unbound by royal succession. He framed it not as a personal rebuke, though everyone inside the palace walls knew it was exactly that, but as an act of constitutional preservation. Yet no one doubted the subtext. Camilla had been written out, formally, legally, irrevocably. The reaction was instantaneous. Charles's legal advisory team was thrown into absolute panic. The coil's legality, notarized in Switzerland, meant UK estate law had no jurisdiction to contest it. There would be no quiet amendments, no behind-the-scenes rewording, no loopholes. The clause was airtight. Any attempt to circumvent it would trigger a reversion clause, sending the entirety of the estates, estimated in the tens of millions, to an external, undisclosed trust. If Charles moved against it, the fortune would vanish entirely from the crown's reach. One advisor allegedly remarked, "Philip planned this with the precision of a general. He left no door unlocked." Perhaps the most damning question remained: who else knew about this? All eyes turned once again to Princess Anne. Speculation mounted that Anne had long been aware of the coil's existence, holding it in reserve like a nuclear option. It wasn't malice, it was strategy, waiting for the palace to fracture just enough for the clause to land, not as disruption, but as reckoning. Anne refused to confirm or deny her involvement, maintaining a silence that spoke volumes. For those watching closely, one thing became increasingly clear. This was not just a final letter from a royal patriarch. This was a time-lock detonation, patiently planted to explode at the precise moment when it would do maximum damage to those Philip believed threatened the monarchy's survival. And now, the bomb had gone off. Catherine's masterstroke followed immediately. She moved not in anger, not with vengeance, but with surgical precision. A new foundation, a symbolic pledge, and a quietly devastating transfer of power, all designed to protect Prince Philip's legacy. No press conference, no grand proclamations. Early one morning, the Royal Communications Office released a quiet statement: the creation of the Philip Stewardship Trust, a private, independent body dedicated to upholding Philip's values. Prince Philip had spent his life defending service, duty, and quiet resilience. Here's the genius. The trust would not be governed by Buckingham Palace. It would answer to the public, be legally autonomous. In essence, Catherine had moved Philip's legacy beyond the monarchy's direct reach, closer to the people, the ones he often claimed were the only reason the monarchy truly mattered. Royal observers were stunned. Legal teams, who had agonised over the Sunset Clause, now found themselves boxed out entirely. Catherine, in one deft stroke, accepted the responsibility of Philip's wishes without appearing to claim the spoils. She refused to inherit the fortune directly. Instead, she appointed a circle of independent, loyal, and highly trusted trustees, ensuring Camilla had no access, not through confrontation, but through structure, not through emotion, but through architecture. It was brilliant, it was bloodless, and it was devastating. But the moves didn't stop there. Catherine redirected several of Philip's most beloved patronages: the Duke's military affiliations, his environmental projects, and the Duke of Edinburgh awards, all bypassed traditional senior royals and went directly to the next generation: Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Lady Louise Windsor. It was a silent succession plan, bypassing debate and emotion in favour of legacy-building action. Catherine wasn't claiming Philip's memory. She was planting it for the future, ensuring it could endure. The public response was seismic. Approval ratings for Catherine soared to historic highs, numbers unseen since Princess Diana's earliest days. Social media erupted, dubbing it a quiet coronation. Meanwhile, Camilla's already fragile image suffered a brutal dip. Analysts noted, for the first time in years, Camilla symbolised division, while Catherine embodied continuity and calm authority. Then came the moment that silenced all doubt. In unreleased BBC archival footage, Prince Philip appeared beside Queen Elizabeth, speaking candidly about the younger royals. When asked who truly understood duty, he paused, smiled slightly and said, "Catherine, she's the one. She knows when to speak and when to let the moment speak for her." The footage aired at the perfect moment. Buckingham Palace, cornered by legal precision and overwhelming public sentiment, issued a short statement, formally acknowledging Catherine as steward of the Duke's private charitable intentions. No ceremony required. No fanfare necessary. The Queen Consort remained silent. King Charles, according to aides, made no objection. Peace settled over the palace like snow after a storm. Yet even as calm returned, one final whisper of Philip's intent emerged from the next generation. During a public engagement in Wales, a reporter asked young Prince George a simple question: "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Standing beside his mother, he paused, glanced at Catherine and answered, "I'll do what great-grandpapa asked. I'll take care of it." The moment went viral. Cryptic, mature, haunting, and instantly linked to the months-long royal storm. Was it rehearsed? Coincidence? Or had the youngest heir already been drawn into a legacy written before his birth? Royal press scrambled to frame it as a child's whimsy, a sweet nod to family history. But whispers inside palace corridors suggested something deliberate. Sources close to Catherine claimed she had begun introducing George to Philip's life, not through formal briefings, but via storytelling, guided lessons, and private tutoring, focusing on royal lineage, political philosophy, and historical precedent. George wasn't being raised to simply hold the crown, he was being raised to understand what earning it truly means. Rumours also surfaced about the Philip Archive, the Duke's sealed collection of journals, letters, and personal correspondence. Far from being destroyed or absorbed by the crown, it may have been set aside, protected, and destined for George. If true, Philip's voice, principles, and warnings would guide the next king, a direct instrument for the future. Today, an uneasy calm has settled over Buckingham Palace. Catherine continues her duties with the same quiet grace that earned Philip's respect. The Philip Stewardship Trust operates independently. Funding causes Philip held dear, untouchable by palace politics. Camilla appears at state functions, but insiders note the warmth between her and Catherine never returned. The silence speaks louder than confrontation ever could. King Charles, caught between his father's legacy and his wife's position, maintains public neutrality. But palace insiders wonder, at what cost to his own peace of mind? Prince Philip's sealed letter achieved exactly what he intended. It drew a line in the sand, forcing the monarchy to confront questions it would rather avoid. It placed the future of the crown not in the hands of politicians or protocols, but in the hands of one woman who never asked for the burden, yet accepted it fully. Because that's what duty demands. That's what Philip understood, and that's what he saw in Catherine from the very beginning. So, what do you think? Was Prince Philip a visionary, protecting the crown's future? Or did he set in motion a conflict that could ultimately destroy the very institution he fought to preserve? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story shocked you as much as it shocked the palace insiders who lived through it, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, share, and turn on notifications because the battle for the British monarchy is far from over. More revelations are coming, more sealed documents may yet surface, and the inner four, they're still out there, watching, waiting for the next move. Don't miss what happens next. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.